I remember how I was feeling, especially last Pesach, that every Passover, I was used to having an overflowing table, be it at my house, a family member's house. When I was living in Israel, the idea of the Pesach Seder was that the Seder table would have to fill up into many different rooms. Some people, we had a separate kids table, or some people were sitting on the couch. And then last year, when it was just my household of five, many of whom weren't necessarily enthusiastically engaged in the Seder, we really wrestled what to do. But the truth is, when we were having this Seder for 20, we were trying to meet everybody's needs and really weren't meeting anybody's needs. We weren't satisfying the needs of the second cousin or the mother-in-law or of our kids. In fact, many years we put our kids to bed before the Seder started so that we could actually enjoy the Seder. If we were going to another person's home, we get a sitter to come to our house so that we could enjoy the Seder without our young children. And so last year was really the first year, this year as well, when it was just the five of us, that we attempted to engage our children in the telling of the Exodus story, in the Seder experience. And so I was thinking of different ways to do that. We got this board game of sorts that sort of looked at the different stages of the Seder as a board game. I got the superhero Haggadah to try to engage my children, comparing the different aspects of the Exodus story to Avengers characters. And I realized throughout the whole experience that I had been doing it wrong all along, because the Seder was never really about me, which is hard for all of us to understand. But the Seder as a storytelling mechanism is really about how we educate children. We want to engage as adults. We want to engage in a way that inspires us and stirs our souls. And we worry about a Seder being too pediatric, but the Seder as a ritual in and of itself is really about how we transmit this story and this experience, this idea of Bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim. This experience that in every generation we should see ourselves as if we left Egypt, how we transmit that to the next generation. And so that was really our goal last year when it was just the five of us. That was our goal this year when it was just the five of us. How will we transmit this story to the next generation? And so one of the questions that came up in the superhero Haggadah was, which Avenger do you think is the wise child? Which Avenger do you think is the wicked child? And we wrestled with these ideas. There were votes for Tony Stark and his Stark tech that invented time travel. Spoiler alert. There were votes for Doctor Strange, for Bruce Banner. Which was the wicked child? There were votes for Loki, for Thanos, but then my daughter spoke up and said, what is the real difference between the wise child and the wicked child? What makes one of them wise and one of them wicked? And so we actually took a superhero Haggadah to accomplish our goal of starting really talking about the Haggadah and looked at the text itself. Because what does the wise child say? Not a rhetorical question. What does the wise child say? Right, what are these laws and statutes? That God commanded you. And what does the wicked child say? What does all this stuff mean to you? And ironically, or not so ironically, the parent responds differently to the wise child and the wicked child, is the one who in fact defines one as wise and one as wicked. The parent who defines the child as wicked does so because specifically the wicked child says, what does this mean to you? At least the Haggadah tells us, and not to us, right? Excluding themselves from what this means. And yet The wise child is saying the exact same thing. He doesn't say, what are the rituals and commands that God commanded us? They say, what are the rituals and commands that God commanded you? And so what makes the wise child a wise child? What makes the wicked child a wicked child? Not what they ask, but how the parent views them. It took my 10-year-old and a superhero Haggadah to help me realize that. What makes somebody wise and what makes somebody wicked is subjectivity and perspective. And maybe that's ultimately the lesson of Pesach that we're supposed to take away. You know, I think about the Erev Rav, this mixed multitude of Egyptians and other people who left Egypt with the Israelites. And I'm thinking, well, why are they choosing to leave now when they were silenced before? Judging them for their silence, judging them for being bystanders, defining them as wicked, not because of what they did, but because of what they did not do. Or honoring Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, right, this greatest of prophets who saw God face to face, who was a hesitant and reticent, and at times kind of lousy leader. But it's all about how we choose to define somebody as wicked or wise. Our lesson as we tell these stories is ultimately our willingness to struggle with each person and just, as a result, struggle with ourselves. And if we're going to carry that lesson over into the real world, I think it allows us to really think about how we define each other, how we judge others, those that we know and those that we don't, those that are close to us and those from a distance, how we judge people as wise or wicked based on where they're from or what they look like or how they present themselves. We're taught when you go on an interview, you dress a certain way and put your best foot forward, and that has nothing to do with who you are. But we think that has everything to do with who you are without really understanding the character of the individual. So my hope and my prayer, as we say that Nisan really begins the new year, for this new year that begins with Pesach, that we open up our eyes to the real questions that are being asked, not to the answers that we want to give. And we're willing to see more of our children, more of God's children, as wise rather than wicked. Chag Sameach.